Hey everyone. So I wanted to make this video for quite a while now, but I couldn't stop making videos about random topics that I had to get off my chest. So this video will be the first video where I actually dive into art history and don't just go on some random rant where I talk about, some random problem I have with the world. But this topic is actually quite interesting to me, this whole topic about mythology. And I kind of researched a lot for this video and came to no logical conclusion. So if you want to skip this video, this is your chance. But I really wanted to take some time to actually talk about what I think happened with mythology. Because if we look at all ancient cultures, from the Romans to the ancient Greeks to the um, ancient China, whatever culture of your choice, we see that a lot of what was written about them and a lot of what they left behind, whether it's artifacts or books or manuscripts, a lot of it had to do with some of their own personal, well, not personal, but mythology, which was personal to them, I guess, as a culture. But a lot of them left something that was unique to them in the sense that they had their own gods, their own tales, their own myths. And it's so weird to me how it seems for these ancient people, myth was literally everything to them. It was, this mystified version of what they would encounter in their real lives. And it kind of created this whole, mystique around storytelling. And we kind of just lost that now, Nobody really, like, talks about myths, and I don't want to hear you say like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, because it's not rooted in individual cultures. It's more so using something that was already there and recycling it into something that would be popular for the masses. But if we look at, for example, um, Greek mythology, it shaped a lot of the Western world we know today. And if you don't believe me, just look at how many words in the English language are directly derived. Let alone Greek language, like a lot of these words are derived from Greek, but a lot of words are derived from Greek mythology in particular, which is quite interesting. If we look at the word panic, it comes from the word Pan, which is the god of nature in Greek, and he instilled fear into travelers. Or the word echo, which comes from the tale of Echo and Narcissus. Narcissus being another personification of a well, not personification, but just a characteristic trait of people. And so a lot of words that we use came from Greek mythology. And frankly, a lot of Western civilization as a whole was built upon the ruins of Greece, whether it's, Rome, even Carthage, and, later American in the 1800s, and what we have today. A lot of it is shaped by what we knew about history. And these myths served more than just, to tell a story. It was a mystified version of either supernatural things that happened in the wild, or to serve, to express a certain archetype of people. But it was somehow an extreme version of everyday occurrences, and it was written so beautifully that people kind of automatically passed it on from generation to generation, and it became the thing of legends. And it was in these individual, again, not individual, but it was in these cultural myths where people could really bond, through, let's say, the hero of Hercules. Who wouldn't want to compare their bloodline to that of a great hero who went through all these trials and tribulations. And so these bonds kind of formed within certain people of their own culture. Now, an interesting thing when looking at mythology is that a lot of it is just repeated in different fonts throughout different cultures. And what I mean by that is, say the god of thunder in Greek mythology, it's Zeus. In Norse mythology, it's Thor. Or if we look at the occurrence of the Great Flood, that was mentioned as early as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is, as far as I know, the oldest epic that we have today. Or for example, dragons. You know, dragons are such a popular characteristic, whether it's ancient Chinese mythology, or even going back to the oldest religion, at least that we know of in the world, which is Zoroastrianism. They also had a lot of myths with dragons. And so my point is, these were kind of universal experiences that we kind of wrote about, and everybody, you know, put their own personal touch to it, but they were these beautiful stories that everybody could relate to. And in this relation, beautiful sculptures, paintings, stories, you know, they kind of served as this line between fiction and reality, where we could be inspired and, but you know, also grounded in reality. Because many of these myths, you know, even though the Odyssey didn't actually happen the way Homer wrote it, Odysseus was most likely a real person, you know, or say like Paris and Troy was a real place. We know of this. And so these myths kind of served as a beautiful interpretation and making it more beautiful than reality itself, which I think is crucial for creating beautiful art. Because even though our reality is beautiful, our minds have this way of magnifying everything that we experience and making it 10 times more unique and magnificent and just, you know, awesome, as opposed to reality, or which can kind of be dull at times, you know. And we can take these beautiful parts from reality and just take it to the extreme in these myths, such as the Odyssey or the Iliad, where we have these magnificent heroes such as Achilles and Paris. And I mean, who doesn't want to read about, you know, the fall of Icarus, a boy who created wings from wax and flew too close to the sun? Like, it's such a beautiful story, and I feel like it's something we're really missing today. Because if you actually talk to anyone, you know, we don't really have these universal, like, not many people are well versed in mythology, and overall it's not something that's interesting anymore. We've kind of moved on from it, even though I think you can't really move on from these universal experiences. We just don't have this unified language anymore, where we can actually share our experiences through these mystified versions of those experiences themselves. You know, I'm rambling a lot here. All of this really makes you question, you know, what happened to these beautiful myths. If people loved them so much, if it was such an essential part of culture, why did they just go away after, you know, the Romans, and, you know, after kind of these modern times, it just kind of faded into existence? And my theory is that kind of it went parallel with us realizing that either God doesn't exist or that we don't need him. And it kind of just, we lost this connection to the divine and to something that is above us. You know, we kind of became more grounded in our material realm, and we forgot about all these things that uplifted us and, you know, made us want to be something more than what we really are. And an important culprit, I also think, is the second industrial revolution. And, you know, let me explain. Because it kind of came with this whole, as we progressed in these kind of inventions, and we got the camera, and, you know, reality, just like I said, became more rooted in what we can see, touch, and, you know, feel with our senses. And so myth kind of became this thing, a myth. It became something that kind of, you know, sure, it's a cool story, but we're past that now. We're kind of rooted in what's in front of us, not what happened, you know, 3,000 years ago, and most likely never even happened in the first place. But obviously, I don't think that this is a positive thing when you focus on a reality that's purely rooted in efficiency and, you know, getting more work done, and not actually paying attention to a more aesthetically pleasing reality that, you know, may not be right in front of your eyes, but people of the past had a way of bringing those things to life, you know, whether it was magnifying what was already in nature, or it was interpreting, signs of the divine into a painting or a sculpture, I feel like we're really missing out on, it's kind of a hole in our lives. And I'm not sure how many people feel this, but I really feel so inspired and just elevated when I read, the Iliad or the Aeneid, I think, by Virgil. And so many of these things kind of, elevate me, even though I recognize that they're a thing of the past and that we're kind of beyond these things. Everybody wants to read and experience a reality above their own. To finally get to the most important point of this video, why I think this is so detrimental to artists in particular, is because when we look at modern art today, it is purely chaotic in the sense that when we make a painting, for example, it is left for interpretation by the beholder. And many people find this, as a good characteristic. However, I would heavily disagree, because when certain cultures had certain myths, say, take the Greeks, for example, the most popular example at least, they had all these sculptures of their heroes, of their gods, of legendary people who accomplished amazing things. And it was a kind of universal language to the people. It was a unified experience. And people could see a statue of Perseus slaying the Medusa, and they would recognize it right away. And there would be a takeaway from that story. I'm not sure what the takeaway is other than to be inspired. But my point is that people will see that and be like, hey, that's Perseus. And they would kind of already know the story behind it. And it would kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting for the artist, because he could take that myth and rewrite it or repaint it, I suppose, in his own language and the way he interpreted it. He could take that myth and kind of interpret it in the way he felt right, and people would still understand the myth, but they would also be, in awe of what the artist accomplished by taking that myth and reshaping it into something that was familiar, but also people had never experienced that particular story through the lens of that artist. And so when you take away that common knowledge of the myths of a certain culture, you're kind of left with this void where people fill in the blanks with what your painting or sculpture or whatever was supposed to convey, what emotion it was supposed to convey. And in my opinion, that's really hit or miss, because some people may find it good, people may find it bad, but there isn't really, this unified experience of seeing it through the lens of, I've already read this story and I like it. And for artists, it makes it much harder to find a topic that will resonate with, almost everybody who paints it. And I'm not saying that you could just paint whatever and just because it was mythology, it would be good. But good artists had a much easier path to success, because they could take what was already there and translate it into different, media forms, whether it was sculpture or painting or writing. They already had a base of knowledge upon which their people of that culture could agree with. But today, when you say paint a boy in the woods, instead it being the beautiful Adonis taking a rest with some nymphs, now you have so many possible interpretations of what that boy could be doing in the woods. And I think that kind of, like I said, is very hit or miss. And most likely it's missed, because people are like, what does that even mean? What emotion does that even convey? And so I'm not sure a lot of people are going to agree with me here, but it is much more difficult in that sense to be an artist today. It is much more difficult to find a topic that everybody can resonate with, that everybody can see and go, hey, I know what that is about. Especially since we've moved to, many artists have moved towards this kind of global model where you appeal to like this global crowd, where say when you post something on Instagram, but a dude from India sees it, a American citizen sees it and a random, Taiwanese dude sees it. And so it's very difficult to find something that resonates with all three of them. And I'm not saying the whole mythology thing is dead. There are a lot of collectors that resonate with mythology of all sorts, whether it's Norse, Greek, Chinese, whatever. But what I'm saying is it just isn't as popular as it was before. And there is a very increasingly smaller niche of people who actually understand myth. And it doesn't have to be just myth, it can be religion too, right? But most people wouldn't even recognize David slinging a rock at Goliath. At least not at first glance. Maybe if they read the title, they would know. But kind of, myth has been, and religion as well, has been kind of dispersed into a lot of cultures, a lot of nations, and it's kind of lost its meaning, it's universally agreed upon meaning. Yeah, I feel like this video was a lot of rambling and of a little getting to the point. So let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. This is still a topic that I'm very passionate about, so as I get better at actually writing the scripts for these videos, I feel like I will be able to convey what I actually mean a lot better. But that's it for now. Again, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.